Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Good.
Okay, so I'll just go straight to it. Distinguished guests, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today, our speakers. Please permit me to recognize very important persons that we have in the room today. Our distinguished Senator Ireti Higa Kingege, thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. Honorable Hanatu Musawa, the Minister of Arts, Culture and Creative Economy, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to recognize every single one of us here as well. Please, wonderful females in the room, thank you so much for taking time out to join us at this wonderful session that we'll be looking at women's financial inclusion and how we can achieve sustainable economic inclusion for all women. So it is my absolute honor to welcome you to this critical discussion on advancing financial inclusion, economic empowerment, and digital access for women at CSW 69. Today, we are not just holding another conference, we are shaping the future. We are here today because the numbers tell a story we can no longer ignore. According to the World Bank, over 740 million women worldwide remain outside of the formal financial system. Women-owned businesses receive only 7% of global private equity and venture capital funds, and the gender-digital divide continues to widen in many parts of the world. But beyond the numbers are the real lives impacted by financial exclusion. The woman who cannot access a loan to expand her business, the girl who is denied digital education, the mother who struggles to break free from economic dependence. These are not just statistics, these are the faces of resilience, ambition, and untapped potential. Across the globe, millions of women continue to face systemic barriers that limit their access to financial resources, economic opportunities, and digital tools. But we know that when women thrive, economies flourish, families prosper, and societies transform. This is why today's discussion is not just necessary, it is urgent. Financial inclusion is not just about banking, it's about power and autonomy. Economic empowerment is not just about income, it is about breaking the cycles of poverty and building legacies. Digital access is not just about technology, it is about equity in a rapidly changing world. We must move beyond conversations to bold transformative actions. This session is about solutions, innovative policies, partnerships, and programs that can accelerate women's access to financial and economic opportunities. Most importantly, it is about all of us in this room, leaders, policymakers, advocates, and change makers, coming together to remove barriers and create a world where women not only survive, but thrive. So I encourage you all to engage deeply and to challenge the status quo, and to leave this session today not just inspired, but ready to act. Let's break the barriers and build a world where every woman has the opportunity to thrive. Because when a woman rises, we all rise. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Rhoda Robinson, for that opening remark. And I would like to apologize for the sound. The sound that was provided is that way, so we'll have to project our voice and do without that this afternoon. We'll move quickly to the special address, the first special address, and that would be delivered by someone really distinguished and important in our midst, and that is Honorable Hanatu Musawa. She is the Minister of Arts, Culture and Creative Economy. I'll quickly read through her profile. It's a large one, it's a massive one, but then I've summarized it into something really something that we could quickly relate to. She holds a law degree from the University of Buckingham, UK, and a master's in legal aspects of marine affairs from the University of Wales. As Minister of Arts, Culture, Tourism and Creative Economy in Nigeria, Mr. Hanatu also serves on the Creative Africa Advisory Group of the African Export-Import Bank. Since 2003, she has been an active political activist, contributing to political discourse through our weekly newspaper column. Hanatu is a dedicated human and women's rights advocate, and has been involved in various charitable causes for many years. Can we put our hands together as
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I think a protocol was established earlier on, so if you permit, I would love to just diligently perch myself on that, so all protocols duly observed. When I was coming to this event, or rather when I was coming to New York for this specific cycle, someone sent me the invite and said, would you be interested in going to speak on this? And I think for me, it really is a no-brainer, because when you think about the impact that you want to make as a minister within a very transient period, one has to look at what would really be the most impactful. And I think at the very core of that is to look at what we do for the women in our societies. Someone wrote me a very sophisticated speech here. And rather than read it, I think when you talk about financial inclusion for women and economic impact, I think it really doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that women are extremely disadvantaged. You look at a country like Nigeria that has a huge growing population of, I think now about 230 million people. And by 2050, we're going to be the third largest population in the world. So I think the world needs to get ready. They're going to be Nigerians everywhere. We're already everywhere. We're going to be more in more spaces. During the campaign, before I became a minister, my President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, spoke about his interest in building something for a future generation. His interest wasn't about what we do in government now. He wanted us to look at what we do for the next generation and the generation after that. And in order to do that, he thought it was very important for us to look at a diversification strategy. So in doing that, he looked at the area of digital economy, he looked at the area of blue economy, and of course, creative economy. And as much as we have so much expression of Nigerian music, Nollywood industry is the second largest film industry in the world. Quality, not quantity. I know, I'm working on it. So, you would have thought that would have been a given, that the creative industry would have had a ministry of its own. But this is the first time in the history of Nigeria that somebody thought, let's create this ministry. And in creating that, he called me and said to me, I need you to make something of this ministry and do a sort of exercise that would really bring economic growth, creative and cultural growth, and also job creation. And he said, whatever you do, you have to concentrate on a younger demographic and on women. And that was what I set out to do. Having met a ministry that had to start from ground zero, I decided to do a deep dive, looking at benchmark countries that have been able to completely monetize their creative industry, such as South Korea. We know what South Korea has done. Even this morning before I left, I had to watch another South Korean movie. I don't say that so often, but it just shows you the power of what creativity does and what music does, So we did this deep dive, and what I saw in there was a huge resource, something that could be real valuable to the Nigerian economy. And then I looked at what Nigerian greats have been able to do. Everywhere you go to in the country, in the world, you're going to hear a Nigerian musician. If you don't hear Davido, I beg you, you're going to hear Burna Boy, right? If not Burna Boy, we're going to hear Thames. And if we don't hear them, we're going to hear someone singing Afrobeats. So there's a huge power in that. So I looked at what they did in these benchmark countries, and then we localized it into Nigeria. And then looking at the huge resource in Nigeria, the power of Nigeria lies within our diversity. We have 240 million tribes in this small geographical space. And these tribes are as different as Chinese and Japanese. It is that diverse. And for a long time, that diversity has been used as a tool to divide us. But within that diversity lies the culture, the brilliance, the vivaciousness, the dynamism that you see come out of a Nigerian. It is rooted within that diversity. So I looked at how we can now use that diversity as a form of economic empowerment. Now, I say all that to say that there is a huge resource for that generation of Nigeria that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had the vision and the mission to, and the mandate that he gave me. We have now, after a year and a year and 2 months or so, done a proper foundational structure, put in a proper framework that would give real fortification for this industry that will outlive us, that will outlive those generations that we're looking at. And now we're at the implementation stage. Now, at this implementation stage, I'm being extremely measured and intentional in ensuring that 50% of all the beneficiaries have got to be women. And not only women, they have got to be women all across the country. Yes. From the rural Sahara of the northern part of the country, where I come from, where often a lot of young girls get married off at a very tender age and don't have the ability to realize their dreams or realize their brilliance. But even within the construct of tradition and society, once you give an enabling environment, you are able to still empower them in a way that they can use their craft within their own tradition to empower themselves, bring value onto themselves, onto their societies, onto their communities, and onto the country. Economic expansion. I am working, and I have committed to ensuring that the creative economy adds at least $100 billion to increase the GDP by 2030. No pressure. So we are working overnight together with the other ministries, and of course, many of you may have or may not have heard of something fantastic known as Dirty December in Nigeria. It happens every December. Every year now, we're working on putting a very structured sort of formula in place, whereby the whole world is going to be clamoring to come into Nigeria, to experience what Nigeria is. But the work has to be done by government coming correct. And in order for you to come correct, you have to ensure that you give that diversification, that access to, especially access to funding. I have just been given recently 2 special purpose vehicles, which I established and I took to the Federal Executive Council, which luckily was approved: the Creative Economy Development Fund and the Creative Economy and Tourism Infrastructure Corporation. Now, these special purpose vehicles have been put in place so that we can attract investment. And thank God, Afrexim Bank came through. We've been able to get at least $200 million of Afrexim funding, which now we have put into this special purpose vehicle, Creative Economy Development Fund, that would be activated on June the 1st. And like I said, I'm being extremely intentional. And I have to say this correct, because Nabila is looking right straight at me. And I think we have discussed ensuring that we do what is right for the community. And I think women, if you're talking about developing a country, which we want to see Nigeria become one of those developed countries, right? If you want to see that, you cannot do that if you don't give women that enabling environment, the same access, the same network, the digital tools. Because women, when you talk about the digital tools, it is a phenomenon that women don't have access to digital tools in the way that men do. And something like that shouldn't really be. That is an anomaly. So we are working again together with the Minister of Digital Communication, Honorable Minister Bosun Tijani, to ensure that we give this access to all the women in the way that they need to, because if we build the women in those beautiful beautiful communities, we are able to really build a country. And just to round it off, because I am a creative, and when you let us talk, we do talk. So I will round it off in a minute, and just want to say that Nigeria is coming correct. It really is. We understand the importance of a country like Nigeria. Nigeria, there's a statistic, 1 out of every 5 African is a Nigerian. 1 out of every 8 Black person in the world is of Nigerian descent. We now know that because that's what the numbers are. And there's a real power in that because many people are looking to get some sort of direction. And up until now, we have not really given a very structured direction. But one I can assure you is within the Ministry of Art, Culture, Tourism, and the creative economy, we are going to make sure that we play our part in that huge vehicle that each and every one of us has a little part to play. And that vehicle is not going to move until each one of us puts the right energy into what we need to put in. We are going to do what we can to ensure we give enabling environment, to give that access, to give that network, and do what is right by the Nigerian people. Because when we do that, we can encourage and inspire a great number of beautiful, beautiful people around the world that may look or may not look like me, or may listen to our music or may not listen to it. But at the core of it, we're ensuring that we give women access to funding, to the infrastructure, to the capacity building, to the digital tools that they need to move this country forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for that wonderful speech. And thank you for setting the tone for a panel session that would happen in the course of the meeting this afternoon. And also thank you for emphasizing the power that we have as a collective, as Nigerians, and how we can shape our future. So thank you so much for that. We have another distinguished senator in our midst, and she will be delivering the next special address, and that is distinguished Senator Ireti Hima Kinkibe. She is the senator representing the FCT. She's a distinguished civil engineer, politician, and philanthropist, currently serving as a senator representing the FCT in the 10th National Assembly. Let's keep going, let's keep going. She is the chairperson.
I'm going to beg your indulgence to sit. Well, my distinguished sisters, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, all other protocols duly observed. It is an honor to address this distinguished gathering at the side event of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, organized by HACEY, Eden Ventures, and Wema Bank. This event is not just a conversation, it is a clarion call for action. Action that mobilizes the resources and competence of all stakeholders, including the public sector, private sector, and civil society, to advance financial and economic inclusion and digital access for women in Nigeria and across Africa. The data is undeniable. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, yet our women, who constitute nearly 50% of our population, remain economically marginalized. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, 70% of Nigeria's extremely poor are women. Financial exclusion remains a significant barrier. Only 45% of Nigerian women have access to formal financial services, compared to 56% of men. The gender gap in digital access is also alarming, with only 34% of women having internet access, or compared to 54% of men. These disparities are not just statistics. They represent lost opportunities for economic growth,
innovation, and national prosperity. However, these challenges lie tremendous opportunities. Women-led businesses recorded growth outperforming their male counterparts. In 2023, 73.6% of female-led businesses contributing to household incomes. They are driving job creation, community development, and national progress. The informal economy, which comprises 89.4% of Nigeria's 14 million micro, small, and medium enterprises, SMEs, MSMEs, is largely powered by women. By formalizing and investing in these enterprises, we can unlock unprecedented economic potential. Now, a few days ago, I presented to the Senate the first reading of the 35% gender inclusion bill. And its significance is, for the first time they're putting our foot through the door. The bill wasn't immediately thrown out as it's been done in the past. And I'm optimistic that we can go to second and third reading and get it to be passed into law. But even so, what will economically marginalized women, what are they going to do? It's one thing to have a law saying, yes, come, but with what? Economic empowerment is key. Without it, we cannot have political emancipation. That's the truth. They go hand in hand. Women have to be empowered. Everything else is secondary. Because when women are empowered, apart from the total growth of the country, it is also the well-being of every family that has an empowered woman. We all know that. And therefore, in women's economic empowerment, it requires more than commitment. It demands enforceable legislation, legislative framework, and gender-responsive policies. Beyond Nigeria's women economic empowerment, the WE policy, we must advocate for legal mandates that institutionalize women's financial inclusion, equal access to credit, gender-responsive budgeting, digital rights protection, and enterprise support legislation. See, every sector, and we must start with the sectors that have women heading them. Every sector must have a gender component in their policies. I spoke to this man who works for BPP and is demanding that a certain number, a certain percentage of contracts must be from women entrepreneurs. And until these things are national policies, we cannot really catch up. And that is why it is the incumbent on all of us to pay attention, to be the policemen of this legislation and these policies, to note the agencies that are not compliant and draw their attention to it. Let us be clear. The rise of women is not the fall of men. It is the progress of everyone. When women have financial independence, entire families thrive. When women have digital access, industries grow. When women's businesses flourish, national economies expand. Investing in women is not charity, it is smart economics. I have an idea which I've been working on, which I've been the policy capital of Nigeria. I was hoping that we would use that as a pilot project and then expand it to the rest of Nigeria and possibly Africa. We women, we're not looking for donations. We're looking for investment. I have this notion that we Africans have to start looking inward. There are 375 million Africans in the diaspora. And I thought if we just say 50 African countries, they're a little bit more, maybe they're 54, but if we just use 50, and 1 million women per country get an investment of $1,000 payable with interest in a couple of years. Do you know? Just imagine, that's $1 billion per country. And I'm working on starting off with just 620,000 Nigerians in women in the FCT. I could even go lower, but I figured let's start big and we can push it down. I haven't worked out the modalities. I need financial institutions to work with me to tell me, okay, what are the dynamics of trying to implement such a policy? Women need to be invested in. And the statistics show that women pay back their loans. There's some places where I've seen up to 98% payback. So women, they're good investments. They're not bad investments. So that's one of the things I'm working on. We just started working with it. We're still talking to financial institutions on how that can be implemented, starting with a pilot. The whole of Nigeria and then other African countries can look at how that can be replicated. Today, I call on all policymakers, government agencies, financial institutions, and private sector leaders to invest in women, not just as beneficiaries, but as partners in shaping a more inclusive and prosperous Nigeria. Let us translate our commitments into action. Let us move beyond promises to implementation. The time is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished Senator, for that special address. One of the key highlights for me from that address was when she mentioned that the rise of women is not the fall of men, and I could see the positive reaction from everyone within the group. So I think if you don't take anything out of this session, please take that with you. The rise of women is not the fall.
Once more, I'm Senator Jetlam. I represent Plateau Central and the Senate Committee Chairman on Labor, Employment and Productivity, the 10th Senate. It's my great pleasure on behalf of those of us male that came from Nigeria. We are here as members of the Senate Committee on Women Affairs. I came with my brother, Senator Samson Ekong, and his wife, very sensitive man, full of equity. We in the 10th Senate have space for our dear mothers and our sisters, distinguished senators. And I would like this opportunity, I listened very carefully to my minister, and I say, wow, when my minister appeared before us for clearance, I never had an opportunity to listen to her the way I listened today. And I really appreciate God for when my senator, as usual, I've been hearing from her and I know her intellectual content. But I think Nigeria and Nigerians are proud of the females in Nigeria.
Yes.
So many of them have done excellently well. We're very proud to have people like Konjo Wema from Nigeria,
Yes.
and several others working with international organizations. I like the data that was raised and explained by the minister and my dear senator on the population in Nigeria and the statistical future of our country on the black world, and the fact that every 5 black men, one must or will be a Nigerian.
Black people.
Yeah, black people. And again, in terms of industrialization, not just a woman, Dangote is a Nigerian with the largest personal refinery in the world. I just want to assure you that the present, I want to assure you that the new administration is futuristic in nature. We think tomorrow, and I'm sure with the policies on the ground, Nigeria is going to actually be the mother and father and a home for the Black world. We are here in our numbers simply because of the belief we have and love we have for our country. And I would like to assure you that anybody investing in Nigeria, in terms of minerals, in terms of human capital also, Nigeria is a great country. And I'm sure that most of you would really, really want to be part of Nigerian progress. As a legislator, we will support any issue that comes up, especially to progress our female gender because we found the women very compassionate in terms of welfare, very high, in terms of being responsible, we are a responsible set of human beings. And therefore, if it is well with Nigerian women, it is well with the entire country. And if it's well with the entire country, it's also well with the entire country. Let's give you this assurance. We're happy that we're here, and I want to assure you that even after appearing here, in our own local, our own consultancy projects, we create space to empower women in terms of agriculture. But by coming here, I want to assure you that I would also increase scholarship for the female. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that you are as organized as this, and I'm happy with the appearance of Nigerians. My minister, if you come for Claire, you just take a bow and go. My sister, you continue to remain our leader, leading us in women affairs. I'm very grateful, and may God bless us.
Thank you very much, distinguished senator. Before we move on to the panel session, would like to recognize the First Lady of Abia State, and that is Mrs. Priscilla Oti. Thank you for your time, and thank you for showing up today. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite, we'll move quickly to the first panel session, and we'll be discussing building women's economic resilience through financial and digital inclusion. And the moderator for that first session is Fabia Ogunmekon. She's a lawyer and development consultant with over 22 years of experience in law and development, specializing in healthcare, gender, and entrepreneurship. And she's the founder of Adaba Initiatives. Yes, I'll just.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, we don't have a mic, so I'm going to try and project as best as I can, and I stand on all the existing protocols. My name is Fabia Ogunmekon, and I'm privileged to be moderating this panel. I'll introduce my panelists. I think our time has now been shortened to about 25 minutes, so we've got a job to do. Abiola Adelano, if I can call you up. Abiola is a tourism and creative arts business manager at Sterling Bank. She leverages finance to grow Nigeria's tourism sector. She's an economist and Harvard alumna with 15 plus years in banking, and she serves on advisory boards and has earned multiple awards. Please let's welcome Abiola. And in no particular order, I'll call the he or she on the panel. Oswald Osaretin-Gobadia. Oswald is a policy advisor and managing partner at Digite, shaping Africa's digital economy. He's an architect of change and a key architect of the Nigeria Startup Act. He's a TED speaker and he champions innovation and digital transformation. He's already here, but we can welcome him still. And last but not the least, I'd like to invite Nabila Agwele. Nabila is the Nigeria Country Office CEO for the Malala Fund, where she leads on strategy and advocacy for girls' education. She's a lawyer and policy expert with 20 plus years of experience, and she has advised Nigeria's finance and budget ministers and served on global boards. Nabila. Okay, so. What's this one? So we have roughly 20-25 minutes. So we'll run through 2 sets of questions, and I'm not sure there'll be time for audience participation, but we'll be guided accordingly. All right, so let me start, since you're next to me. I'll start with you. I'd like you to speak a little bit about your work, particularly in the digital and financial inclusion space. And in speaking about that, I'd like you to speak about access, women's access, girls' access to these spaces, but more importantly than access, resilience, which is really the topic of our conversation, and economic resilience, to be even more specific, and why this is so important.
All right, great. Thanks so much for having me. I'll stand on existing protocols. So my work, as you've shared already, currently is in the girls' education and advocacy space. So I lead a nonprofit organization that through advocacy and grant giving is working to ensure that girls have access to 12 years of education. Now, my background and sort of my pathway into education and why I'm here is that I served for 7 years as an advisor to the immediate past Minister of Finance, Budget and Planning. I was the lead on development of the WE policy, the Women's Economic Empowerment Policy from the ministry, and also the lead on development of the Integrated National Financing Framework. So my framing, my perspective on financial and economic inclusion is a holistic one. It's one that defies sectoral barriers, and one that really believes that for true inclusion, for true progress, not just for women, but for Nigeria, we need to look at this not just as a financial or sort of a sectoral issue, but look at it holistically as one that spans several sectors, which is why it was incredible to have the minister. Rhoda is telling me to speak louder. It was incredible to have my dear sister, minister in the creative sector, speak first, because it speaks to this inclusive perspective. Now, in terms of the difference between access and resilience, I'll make 3 points very quickly. The first is that access is important. It's an important first step, but it is not and cannot be the solution. And I think for many, many decades, we framed access as the solution to financial and economic empowerment. And as we've seen, as banks and governments have put in place policies, measures that improve access, we do not see catalytic shifts in terms of the ways in which women are able to be better included and empowered across the financial and other sectors. So that's the first point I'll make. And so therefore, we must shift to a resilience framing, one that understands that access is a first step, but to really ensure true empowerment, we need to think about the holistic environment in which these women sit. To what extent is their access bolstered and resilient to economic and other shocks? To what extent is the environment in which they operate allowing them to truly leverage the financial and other resources that are at their table to truly use that money and in ways that are holistic and can actually unlock their own businesses and others as well? And to what extent are there policies and regulations in place that ensure that they're safe? Are there safety nets? Do we consider investments in childcare and those impacts? And to what extent are we making links between access, resilience, and other sectors? Education, for example, there's a strong link between adolescent girl education and improved empowerment, improved labor, and improved and employment, and also improved financial and digital literacy skills. So to what extent are we saying, we've given you these tools, go ahead and take them, which I think is a lot of the framing right now. We need to shift to a resilience mindset that says that we recognize that even with that access, if we don't address the whole of the problem across sectors, we will not shift the needle. Therefore, true inclusion and economic empowerment for me is a shift from entry and access to one of resilience, and that takes into account the entirety of circumstances for women.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much. So access is the first step, but if we really want to see resilient economies, we must think about, go beyond the enabling environments to think about a more holistic framing. Thank you very much. And the same question to you. What is the difference between access and resilience in your space of influence?
Thank you very much for having me. You know, being invited to this was amazing in itself. Ultimately, the flyer drew a lot of attention. People saying, you're the only guy among so many women. You know, to the point that my wife came to come see what this is all about. So I walked in and she was here surprising me, saying, "Hey, this why and all this what's all about." So I think that sort of speaks to inclusion. So being the only guy has the kind of attention that drew. I think I've always lived in the environment where I'm just a guy. So there's no real impact or no real understanding what it means to be the only one or being the token, which I'm sort of the token today. I was actually introduced as the he for she. Please, I want a t-shirt with that. So I think, as Nabila said, access is no way it ends. Access is not the target. When you look at technology, even access, people sit on access, but can't access the access, right? So in technology, about over 40% of the access that's available to people is not attainable because of a number of different issues. It could be the lack of equipment, so you have the wrong phone. So you're sitting around 5G, 10G, but you can't access it because you don't have the right equipment. And then you also look at digital literacy, right, which is really important, right? So it's one thing to say, oh, I have a phone. Most of us have phones. We use about 12% of them. So imagine other people who just don't have a basic education. And then we start looking at what is digital literacy in essence, right? Is it speaking English, or is it the language that you are birthed with, right? So is it really becomes comprehension is what literacy really means. So we're so far off from that, right? So we talk about inclusion, but the building blocks to inclusion must include getting people equipped to be included, right? So it's like entering a room and not being in the right outfit. You're not really there. You're not part of that party, right? So how do we ensure that we are building people, we're building women, right? To be able to participate in what we're calling inclusion, right? It's not just about opening the door and having access to it, but it's what are we putting in our education system, right? So of recent, I stopped by. She's not my goddaughter, but she's a friend's daughter, and I bought her a doll. And her mother is an engineer, right? So she's watching me play with her daughter with the doll. I just sent it to my wife. She's laughing at me. Oh, there you are playing with dolls. But then we started having this conversation about how does this affect the pipeline, right? When we talk about inclusion, so a lot of times we look at inclusion, we talk about inclusion from a consumption perspective. What about the producing side of it, right? The whole engineering pipeline, right? So I'm an engineer as well, so I think of things in engineering terms. So you have a pipeline. How many people are we training to put in that pipeline? So we can have engineers on the other end, right? What are the offshoots of the pipeline? Why is the leakages in the pipeline, right? So why do women end up leaving? So these issues, childbirth, the jobs, marriage, societal pressures, these are the things we need to address alongside with the conversation about access. Because otherwise, the doors we flung open and we said, you have access, but then you still can't move the needle because all of the building blocks are not in place. So I'll stop there.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Okay, so let me come to you, Yola. Okay, so most banks now have, gender businesses, gender desks, women in banking, businesses, a part of most banks where they're sold. So how does Sterling Bank, in terms of the product offering, how are you designing products specifically for women, and what is the general landscape when it comes to beyond access?
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. Good day, everyone. Permit me to say some existing principles. My name is Abiola, and my background is banking. So I've been in banking for 16 years, and 10 out of these 16 years, I manage the risk management for the bank, and I've seen it all. Right. Beyond access, right positioning is very, very critical for women. So a few years ago, there's the young lady that came up with this very smart business idea initiative. She had a strategy document right, and she walked up to our bank manager like, okay, I have this great business idea. All I need now is financing. And this branch manager asks us different questions. Do you have collateral? Do you have this? Unfortunately, she doesn't have any of this. And her document was just trashed. This woman She's one out of the very few lucky ones. She managed to raise funds through family and friends, and she developed a product that is well known across the globe now, Body Shop, right? But this is just one out of many. A lot of women have fantastic, great business ideas, but funding, and they are not positioned, for collateral. I'm not an advocate for free funding or grants and stuff, because I've seen us develop women from ground zero to the next level. As little as 50,000 naira, you've seen women actually turn over this and become millionaires, meaning that women are very great managers of funds, right? So we need to start sensitizing women about financial literacy, right? Building a proper structure for their business. Data has it that 10% out of 10 women in the developing country has landed property, because it wasn't a thing for women. Women feel that it's just a man thing to buy lands and properties. So when they approach financial institutions for funding, they have nothing to offer. And we're not going to use the sentiment because I'm a woman, the bank is going to give you free funding. No, these are depositors' funds. They need to be sure that they are going to pay back right. So we need to now start developing a tailor-made offering, financial institution offering that will be suitable for women. So the Body Shop lady approached the bank manager and said, okay, for 2 years, I won't be able to pay back. Grant me a moratorium for 2 years, and in the next 3 years, I will start paying back. And it looked so unrealistic to the branch manager. And this is because they are not creative enough to think, oh, let's create a tailor-made offering that was suitable for this woman, right? So as financial institution, we've gone beyond conventional banking, right? We've seen most banks, they are much more creative. They are fantastic tailor-made offerings for women, especially Sterling Bank. In the past 5 years, Sterling Bank has been getting the Best Space award consecutively for 5 years now. And it's not just award for the fun of just giving award. I mean, the workings are there. We have tailor-made products for women.
Give some examples.
Yeah. Some of them we partner with Sweden, right, for women. So single digit funding for women with moratorium that is suitable for their business plan. So if you're going to go into trading, we can't expect you to start paying back immediately, right? So, and also beyond financing, we are creating infrastructure opportunities for women in the grassroots, right? Most of the women want to do business, but they don't have places to drop their children. So we create daycares, right? So you can drop your kids and still work. And I mean, you're able to build your business. And that is beyond, and that's why I said it's beyond financing. Technical skills is very important. We need to start sensitizing and start training these women, for them to be better positioned to take advantage of all of these numerous offerings across the world. There's grants, there's funding, there's everything, but are you positioned to take advantage of all of those opportunities? So beyond, when we say accelerate, you have to be moving before you accelerate, right? So yeah, that's it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I like the phrase you used, right positioning, which could also be rights positioning, right? So used in different ways. So that's brilliant. So it's one thing to have the access, it's another thing to ensure things like capacity and the opportunities are there for the women to actually access and they know about it, because it's one thing to have all these products in this. And I hope that it's a continuous process in terms of product development. Okay, so let's move to policy. And I'll come into Nabila. You did mention you were part of the developing the National Women's Economic Empowerment Policy, which is now currently being domesticated, and I know we'll have a panel. The next panel will be focused on policy. But it's again, building on from the first conversation we had in terms of access. So policy obviously gives access. Policy provides the enabling environment, for women to begin to access these opportunities. But then the question is, how do we move from policy to action, accelerating action, right? So how do we move from policy to effective implementation, especially, in the conversation we're having around digital inclusion and financial inclusion specifically?
All right, thank you for that. And I think the answer would be the same regardless of what conversation we're having. We need to, and we love policies. We love to launch and discuss our policies. We need to radically shift from policy announcement, policy proclamation to implementation and financing, right? You cannot implement policies unless they are backed by resourcing. And I think also the stakeholders, whether it's government stakeholders, community stakeholders, private sector, also need to be brought to the table to really understand the value of the policies. So the first thing I'll say is, in the conversation that we're having around women's financial and by extension economic empowerment, it's really important that we start from a place of helping stakeholders understand why this matters beyond the rights and needs of the women that we seek to empower. This matters from a community perspective. It matters from a labor and employment perspective. It matters for our broader development as Nigerians. We will all thrive together, or we will fluster and waffle together. And I think, for me, coming from the finance perspective as a gender rights advocate, I don't use sentiment to make the case. I use numbers, I make it make sense. If I'm speaking to economists, I use the numbers that speak to the economy. If I'm speaking to those in the labor space, I use those figures. If I'm speaking to bankers, I use those figures. So those of us who seek for our policies to come alive, whether it's from an advocacy perspective or whether it's from a government perspective, we need to think about who we're engaging and how to make this matter to them so that they can be part of the change that we hope to see. So that's number one, implementation. The second is implementation without accountability mechanisms is not going to be a process that allows for learning. It's not going to be one that allows for us to even ensure that the women that we seek to financially empower are actually the beneficiaries. So without whether monitoring and accountability mechanisms and without gender responsiveness at the center of our policy making and implementation, we will not ultimately see the results and the impact that we hope to see. This is not sentiment, it is fact. It's documented everywhere. And this is why, for example, both the World Bank and the IMF have mainstreamed gender across all of their work, because they recognize that that has to be an element of how they see implementation. Can we have a round of applause? Ooh, okay, that's much better. It's a good sign. It's a good sign. It's a good sign. So really quickly, at Milana Fund, as I've said, we are a nonprofit. We believe in the power of policy advocacy, and the mechanism that we do it is through supporting Nigerian nonprofits who are both advocating and working alongside federal and state governments to push for education policy. And the reason I frame it as such is that we know that the work really has to be from us, led by government, led by private sector, but always engaging and involving those in civil society, those nonprofits, and always reflecting the voice and the needs of the women and girls we hope to empower. And what has really struck me just in the less than 1 year that I've been doing this work is the extent to which it is still unusual for civil society to have a seat at the table. It's still unusual for stakeholders, whether it be the women we hope to serve or girls, to be at the table, and we really need to make that part of our implementation, because otherwise, who are we helping? And do we even know that what we're doing is really serving them? We can't if they're not at the table. So that for me is quite critical. And then just sort of really the social norms piece, I have to speak to that. The attitudes, the biases, even in hearing my sister speak about the challenges women face in accessing funding, the challenges with respect to land ownership, there are cultural attitudes and norms and misperceptions that we need to factor into how we design and implement our policies. If we don't understand why communities and why women are not able to take advantage and run with the policies and opportunities we're putting in place, we cannot move forward. So I'll leave it at that.
Sorry, Numa. Yes, we have 5 minutes.
So
Yeah, 5 minutes, but I think we can do a fire round, two. So 2 minutes each for both Oswald and Abiola now for your questions. Okay. So again, we're staying on action. So we've talked about access and the importance of access. First of all, the building blocks. So back to you, Abiola, in the financial sector. I think you're started talking about products, right? Products from a perspective, like Nabila said, coming out as a result of thinking about the audience, designing for her. So if you wanted to sort of build on that a bit more in the 2 minutes, and maybe you can just do your wrap up at the same time in terms of your call to action and what you think we can do differently to really accelerate action. So yeah, what are the specific needs that from your work you're seeing that needs to be addressed that can really lead to this idea of resilience?
Thank you very much. So I feel that for us to solve a problem, we need to understand the problem. So stakeholders engagement is very, very critical. My charge relates to our government. While we are trying to draft all of these policies, I think it is important that we collaborate with private sector. Let's have the stakeholders engagement. Let's even understand what the problem is for us to be able to provide the solutions. And I feel that collaboration rather than competition is the way to go for us. And we're open and willing to go on that journey with everyone here. Yeah, thank you.
Starting with the bank.
Starting with Sterling Bank, yeah.
And so again, for you, Oswald, your wrap-up statement, but then also building it around the kinds of investments that you see are required in terms of infrastructure, resource mobilization, for building a resilient, gender-inclusive digital economy.
In 2 minutes, huh?
Yes.
Fantastic. So I think we need to look at infrastructure differently. We have this mindset of leapfrogging, which always has us jumping from one place to the other. Elephants don't jump, right? Elephants don't leap. It's important that we take the structural route to ensure that we are doing all the steps that we must to implement the right solutions. Policy is a tool, and it's critical as a starting point for deployment of development. Intentionality is critical. I know I have 2 minutes, but I have to say this. So there was a trip that I did to Tunisia once. And in Tunisia, I noticed a very strong position of women in a lot of different roles. It got to a point I had to ask. I just said, sorry, what has happened here? That's how obvious it is. And they told me maybe 30 years ago, a president gave a policy that led to this. And you could literally see it. You go to a meeting, go to a new office, you see the presence of strong women doing very powerful things. And that was very, very inspirational. So that speaks to the importance of implementation of policies, right? It's one thing to, like Nabila said, and made me laugh inside, it's one thing to announce a policy, but it's something else to actually implement that policy, which is the critical part. One thing we tend to do is that we treat policies as an asset class, something to hold on to and put on the shelf and let it shine, as opposed to when it should be a functional class, something that should be released and the value should be released into the people. So a lot of policies, I think I'm going to start saying Nigerian Startup Act for one, it's sit on a shelf, hasn't been implemented, right? So that is something shiny that you always announce, we're doing something about it, but not with it.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to you, Nabila, for your call to action in 30 seconds.
Okay, so my quick call to action is that in everything we do, we need to unburden the very people and communities that we hope to serve in the design and implementation of our policies. What frustrates me most about the women's financial and economic empowerment space is that so much of it still is framed from the perspective of what the women need to do to get to that place. When we know, when the data tells us that they are at a disadvantage, they're doing all the right things. They are financially accountable, their businesses are succeeding, they are leading. So I think really asking ourselves to what extent are we intentionally and unintentionally bringing that biased perspective into the way that we approach these beneficiaries and really setting things right. And the best way to do that is to have them at the table.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think that's us on our panel. In summary, we've talked about moving from access to resilience. Resilience meaning ensuring that the access that we provide is sustainable. The enabling environment is actually utilized and deployed in the most effective way. So we want more collaboration. We want more intentional products that are designed with women in mind and designed for her. And to do that, we need to know her, we need to understand her, that's the grassroots, going deep to basically do the research and ensure that we're designing for her. We want to be able to then open up access by
Okay, time up, right? The right resources, building capacity and ensuring accountability. Women, to borrow from Madam Iriti's words, womenomics is not about tokenism, we are good business. So thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests. Permit me to stand on already established protocol so we can get right into this conversation. And we're going to be talking about policy, partnerships, and practice, advancing women's economic rights through inclusive policies and development frameworks. You see, our esteemed panel is ready to jump into this conversation, so they've come, right here to sit. But permit me to introduce them in 1 minute. Robin Burns is the Director of Development USA at Empower. Please let's clap for her. Then Reed Mrs. Tenlong. She's the Gender Advisor, Women in Leadership, Albright Stonebridge Group. Please let's make her welcome. And then Hansatu Adigbite is Harvard alumna, former executive director of WIMBIS. We all know Hansatu. Please let's make her welcome. And then joining us online, Honorable Titi Lopez Bademosi, Special Assistant to the President on Youth Initiatives. You're welcome, Titi. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Titi joins us soon.
She's online.
Oh, she's online. Yeah. Great. Hi, Titi.
Hi.
Yeah. So why do we think this conversation is important? I mean, we've been speaking all day, but now understanding the fact that we need to drive inclusive development through policies that speak to the conversations and ensure that we're not just having conversations that we cannot take into decision-making spaces, and then use that as a tool to demand for accountability, to track progress we're making, and then to just get everyone on the same page as to what we've agreed to achieve. So I will start with you, Ring. A lot of conversations have gone on around women's economic empowerment, and you have been at the center of the Women Economic Empowerment Policy. How do we adapt this policy to ensure that the woman at the last mile is actually participating and leveraging this policy to make her life better? So beyond the conversations, how do we move these conversations to ensuring that women benefit? And while you're answering that, to throw in the conversation around digital inclusion, because without digital inclusion, we really cannot scale any conversation around women economic empowerment. So over to you.
Thank you so much, the moderator. So I'd like for us to, So I'd like for us to imagine a world in a remote village, and I'll use my village. I come from a village in Plateau State called Peel. So imagine if you are in Peel, Ghani, a remote village, and a woman has access to sell her crops. We grow granules, we grow cotton. I do not need to come to Jos, the capital of Plateau State, or I do not need to come to Abuja. So imagine on my phone, I can just connect markets, not just in Nigeria, but beyond Nigeria to Africa. And also imagine that I do not have to go online to look for schools or to disturb my distinguished senator for scholarships for my daughter, but I can actually online enroll her into schools or skill acquisition. It's not perfect, it's possible. And it's possible because we already have a blueprint and a framework. The first national women's economic empowerment policy that was developed in Nigeria and it was launched 2023. We have a cross-cutting accelerator on digital innovation, access, and literacy. And if we're able to domesticate that policy and implement the policy and the strategic actions, that will be a reality. And it's not just having a one-size-fits-all policy, because during the dialogue, we took 18 months to go around Nigeria. And what we did and what we realized was that we needed to capture the cultural nuances of each zone in Nigeria, religious and then economic, realities of each zone. And now that we have a blueprint nationally, it's now left for states to domesticate and implement these policies. But how do you do it? You need to involve women. You need to involve the private sector. The other panel has said the need for private sector involvement. You need to involve the community-based organizations. We've always been taught, oh, add women, bring women to the table. But I would like to say we need to move and have a paradigm shift that from the inception of building that table, we need women there. We're not an addendum, because sometimes you bring us in the middle or halfway through the process and there's a whole lot of disconnection. So I believe that we need to start up and trust the process, involve local voices, safe spaces, and then also with digital access. We need to have those hubs, digital hubs. We know we have those broad fiber optics, but then let's go to solar panels and hotspots, Wi-Fi for women and for organizations. And then also to work on subsidized rates, data plans for women. We can actually work on that. We have senators here. We can actually lobby with some of the communities and comms organizations to have a package for women and then to help showcase what women are doing. And also we need to keep telling our stories. We need to keep telling women's stories. The voices of women must be amplified for us to do this. And currently Nigeria has women, about 34% women have access to mobile internet, and that's not good enough. So we really need to keep amplifying these voices. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Reen. And speaking to adaptation for local implementation and ensuring grassroots participation. At the Policy Innovation Center, we're privileged to support the domestication of the Women's Economic Empowerment Policy in Lagos State. And we had some meetings with lodgers and grassroots women. And some of the feedback they gave to us was, can you give us capital? And can you give us money without collateral? So flexible capital. Can you tie some of this support to infrastructure, building infrastructure for us? And one of the other things they also said about just adapting this to them is also ensuring that we create opportunities for them to compete better with men in some of the spaces they are. So thanks so much, Reen. I believe there's so much more we can do with sitting down at the grassroots and actually designing and adapting our designs to meet the felt needs of the women at the last mile. Thank you. I'm coming to you, Hansa, too. And I think what I just said feeds into the question I'm going to ask you. A lot of women entrepreneurs are pulling their weight, working hard across all the challenges, either with childcare, capital, productive assets. How do we begin to challenge the barriers they face, especially in accessing financial services? How can we make our current financial ecosystem work better for women? And how can we make the most of the little that we have as a country to really improve financial access, given the fact that when we start at 10%, and then a woman is really now trying to scale. So women don't have a problem with starting where they are, but do we want to build female entrepreneurs who can work at scale? What do we need to do differently to get there.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hansatu, and for those that know me, first of all, they know gender is always on my agenda. And secondly, I am a very community-based person. So I serve, I belong to a lot of associations. So I serve on various advisory boards, Women in Healthcare Network, Women in Energy, Oil and Gas, Association of Nigerian Business Women. I was the Executive Director of Women in Management, Business and Public Service. I serve on the advisory board of Women Radio. So you can see that I work with a lot of collectives when it comes to women. When we look at most of our associations, almost all the bankers are there. We have bank MDs, chairmen of banks, and so on and so forth. So when you talk about access to finance, they're all there. But across all these collectives, I know that economic power is what is absent. You know, everybody's playing in their silos, but I think the areas that really have that economic power are lacking. So I'll give you a very simple example. When we look at procurement in Nigeria and even globally, in Nigeria alone, the procurement industry is over billions of naira. Less than 1% of women-owned businesses benefit from public and private procurement in Nigeria. And we have over 100 million women. And so even less than 1%. And when we're looking at our women-owned businesses, yes, we're 40% worldwide globally. So we have the highest percentage of women-owned businesses globally. But in terms of the statistics, when you look at the kinds of economic resources they are controlling, majority of them fall into the micro and the small kinds of businesses. And so obviously that can translate into the fact that we have a population, but the economic resources that they are controlling is very minimal. So that's one. So first of all, in the area of policy, for me, affirmative procurement is key. Thank God our senators are here. They're the ones that approve budgets. They're the ones that, even our minister, they're the ones that even give the contracts and so on and so forth. All we're just saying is, and we're starting for the states, Abia State is represented indirectly. In Nigeria, we're pushing for affirmative procurement, which simply means that at least 30% of procurement in states, in the federal government, and so on and so forth, should go to women-owned businesses. Women-owned businesses can form consortiums so that they can now come together to execute some of these contracts, because usually in their silos, they can't do it. World Bank and obviously UN Women have started training more women-owned businesses to have capacity. Where we are lucky women now, where the opportunity lies, is that the current Director General of the Bureau for Public Procurement that was appointed by the President, Mr. Adebowale, served with us over the past 2 years on affirmative procurement policy under the Ministry of Women Affairs and also the UN Women. So it gives us an advantage because he is also very vast in that, and I know that he was going to push for that. Kaduna State have passed the affirmative procurement policy. We believe that Lagos State will be next, and then we're looking to see it across all the states of Nigeria. So that's very key. The second thing I will just also push for is, I want to really say that there's something that always happens when we're looking for interventions for our women, even in the rural communities. Anytime there's any kind of intervention, what we keep on seeing is sewing machine, grinding machine. As if to say that the women in Nigeria cannot do anything else but sew and grind. And I think we need to do things that are fit for purpose. We don't even ask them. First of all, we should find out what do they need, what is their trade, what can they do. And once you do that, you now also have to train them a bit on how to manage their financial resources and things like that. And then when you're giving them interventions, it should be fit for purpose. Yeah. I'll stop here because I can continue for a minute.
Thank you. Really speaking to the women and asking them a very simple question. What do you need? What do you want? Thank you so much, Hansatu. Okay, I'm going to Titi Lope now. How can state governments and local government, just based off of what Hansatu has talking about, and I'm just going to pick on even the conversation around affirmative procurement, affirmative action, we've all collectively agreed that that is central to really being able to increase the participation of women. At state and local government, how can we have this conversation about, creating policies, using this as an example, to really support women better and address the barriers that they face?
Thank you very much, the dear moderator, for this question. I am very happy again to be a part of this panel. Very important discussion, very timely, and this is the right time more than ever. With respect to the question you asked about how state and local governments can decentralize initiatives that would empower more women in businesses and economic growth, I am of the opinion that it's important first off, for state governments and local governments to look at the comparative advantages of their states. What are the comparative advantages of these local governments of these states? What are the, what's the concentration of opportunities that these state governments have? The women in these states, in these local governments, are they people who are more involved in tie and dye business? Are they people who are more involved in farming? Are they people who are more involved in marketing, as it might be? So that would be the first step, identifying the comparative advantage of these women in their different states. Most importantly, I think that whatever the local government or state government has in terms of policy for women to grow economically would not be very successful if they do not latch on to the federal government initiatives that already abound. We all know that federal government initiatives are not, they are usually not implemented at the federal level. They are decentralized at the subnationals. And at the federal government level, we have quite a number of initiatives that can benefit women across Nigeria. For instance, under SMEDAN, that's the small and medium scale enterprises, we have women and the youth desk. We have the digital learning training for all by the NITDA agency. We have the Bank of Industry, which also has the youth and women desk. And of course, there's Nexim Bank, Nexim Bank's youth and women exports facility. So it is important for local governments and state governments to tap into these initiatives, to step them down into their own local government or state governments. Because one thing that we also have to understand is that whatever policies that are made at the state or federal levels will not be made in a vacuum. They're usually made on the back of the information we have from the local government, whatever information we get from local government, which is also the state government, because we are trying to really decentralize at this point. So there is really no need. There is not a need for the state government to have their own separate policies, except they are doing those policies in line with their own comparative advantage. And I also like to mention that it's also important for the state government and local government to look at the partnership that they can build with the private sectors and the civil society organizations. I am a founder of a civil society organization called Women to Africa, and we do not work in a vacuum. We cannot work in a vacuum. Whatever we have as initiatives, whatever we have as ideas must be inculcated into what the state or local government is doing. Because we have the opinion, and I am also of the opinion that whatever the private sector or the state government is doing, or the civil, whatever the private sector or the CSOs are doing, without the state or local government, they would have been wasting their time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Titi. Thank you so much for that. And then Robin, I come to you finally, the icing on the cake. So just two conversations really, in terms of getting stakeholders to collaborate and to ensure that we can work together, bring our synergies together and do more. Can you share, what's some of your thoughts on that? And then just a little bit about how donor agencies can also support local frameworks that promote women economic empowerment.
Thank you so much, everybody. So I work for Empower, the Emerging Markets Foundation, and we have long been a partner with HACEY. And my answer today is going to center around convening and bridging. I think these are essential ingredients to any multi-stakeholder collaboration that's going to be effective. So also just want to recognize that HACEY brought all of us together today. They have served as a bridge and as a convener for us. And with the foundation that I work for, we do the very same with over 155 grantee partners across the world. And what has worked very effectively for us speaks to very much what we were talking about on the panel, which is saying what do you need? How can we help you? To listen to the voices of those that we are trying to serve. And in the case of Empower, for more than 25 years, we have been working with community-based organizations that specifically focus on women and girls. And we work with organizations like HACEY, whose programs have girls advisory councils. We are particularly unique in the fundings field because we have 10-year-long partnerships. I think this is something that is really rare, but which is vital. If we are going to see change, it has to be a long-term investment. So Empower makes that investment by working with the private sector, financial industries, individual donors of influence. We gather knowledge from all of our global grantee partners. We share that knowledge and we make sure that everyone is included. But at the end of the day, we are listening to girls' voices. It's about making sure that we are collaborating, listening, making long-term partnerships, as well as making trust-based philanthropy. We know that those who we are partnering with know better than we ever can what the needs are. So we are making those long-term commitments. We are doing it with trust. We are gathering the knowledge. We're sharing it out. And young women and other marginalized youth are benefiting. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really wish we would have had an opportunity to have conversations in the room, but Rhoda is behind there telling me to round up. But I think it's really been insightful. I think some takeaways quickly is one, we're going to listen to women and girls more, take feedback. Two, there's a consensus that we need an affirmative framework to ensure that we can increase representation of women. And then finally, we know that we need to work together so that we can leverage our strengths and synergies to ensure that we're doing better. I'm just going to have my panelists, maybe in 1 word or 1 second, just say something that summarizes your thoughts about today.
So for me, true empowerment is beyond inclusion, but it's about ownership and control. So we should allow women to own the process. Thank you.
Let us domesticate our policies. Enough of policies sitting on the shelves. Let us ensure that we give more women opportunities in leadership positions across all sectors. And then above all, let us ensure that we know what the needs are so that we give them the right solutions.
I'm going to reiterate what I heard my peers say earlier, which is resilience. We have to be thinking not only about what are the solutions, what are the actions, but how do we ourselves stay resilient? How do we model this for the young people in our life through intersections with mental health programs and all that we do? So cheers to the mental health of the women in this room, the resilience of the women in this room, to coming together and to trusting each other.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Titi Lope, one last word on you.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity again. My last word would be that it's important for all of us to know that collaboration with government is very important for women's emancipation and growth.
Thank you. I'm so sorry I forgot to introduce myself in the rush. Osatiri Dirisu, Executive Director of the Policy Innovation Center. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you so much. We'll just take the final video. It's our keynote video from the First Lady of Forest State. She unfortunately isn't able to join us physically, but she has graciously sent us her keynote address. Please. So as we wrap up, please let's pay attention. And thank you all again so much.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Well done.
Hello. Hi, everyone. You're going to build and actually listen to our documents.
Hi,